And we're back with the show. This is the PCC Multiverse. My name is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. We truly appreciate you being back with us. And guess what? It is week 12 already. This season is flying by.
Flying by.
Yes, like a flock of seagulls. No, not the ones with the bad hairdos from the 80s. An actual flock of seagulls. But I tell you what, we're going to have another great weekend in the NFL. Couple games less than normal because of the turkey holiday, but it's still going to be great nonetheless. And who is here to break it down with me? None other than my good friend. He is the host of the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast, which you can find right now on Apple Podcasts, Overcast.fm, Player.fm, any app out there that utilizes the iTunes and Apple podcast feed. And we were just talking about it. We're probably on like 3, 4, 5 dozen. We don't even know. But also SoundCloud and Libsyn as well. It's Tyler Baker. What's going on, man?
Hey, man, it's always good to be on your show.
I heard you had to go seek psychiatric help after your first time doing an entire show with me. So I want to sincerely apologize to you for that.
No, it was cool. I just hope I did a good job for all of your listeners. It's a little out of my wheelhouse, but I was certainly happy to do it. It was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it as well. And I will tell you this. You had some insightful thoughts on both the Justice League and also a lot of Black Friday deals, some of which at the time of this airs may still be out there. So you want to check out his thoughts on our Pop Culture Cosmos show. It's available on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel anywhere you can listen to it. So, like I said, it's got the Apple podcast feed. My gosh, it could be everywhere.
We're out there, buddy.
Exactly, indeed. But it's going to be a great weekend in the NFL. And I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to a lot of things. But first, before we get into that, there was some changes that might affect the way people start their lineups and make those changes and all that. What's going on right now in the NFL?
Well, there are a couple teams that are, I think the coaches are on the hot seat, one of those being the Denver Broncos. Their offense has been sputtering this season. All year long, it's been sputtering. So Mike McCoy has been given his pink slip, and he has been replaced by Bill Musgraves. And Bill Musgraves has quite a bit of experience with offensive systems. And while they're making that change at offensive coordinator, they've also announced that Paxton Lynch is going to be the starter. Now, we've seen Paxton Lynch in the past. It hasn't been particularly impressive, but a fresh start. They don't have a lot to lose. So they're running him out there. Trevor Siemian just isn't getting it done. Brock Osweiler, you kind of know what he is. So they're going to give the ball back to Paxton Lynch and see if he can turn things around for that Denver offense.
Now, I also wanted to mention as well with Oakland, the Raiders, that they had a significant change as well to their defensive format after getting basically just run out of Mexico City by the New England Patriots.
Yeah, defensive coordinator Ken Norton Jr. managed to save his job last year, but he did not make it through the entire way this year. They have some talented pieces on that defense, and they've added some. They got Navarro Bowman, which at this point in his career is just kind of a situational piece. But they do have pieces on that defense that the franchise just feels like that they could be better, and they're not. And so they've made changes. John Pagano is now the defensive coordinator. So trying to make a fresh start on defense, trying to jumpstart things. They're not completely out of the playoff race, but man, they got to win a lot of games if they want to see the postseason this year.
So there's also some great matchups in the NFL. But there was actually a couple injuries. I know with your favorite team, the Washington Redskins, there was actually someone that significantly changes a lot of people's fantasy rosters being injured for the rest of the season.
Sure. The Skins have this running back. He's kind of like a Swiss Army running back, runs the ball, catches the ball, does a lot of really, really good things for that offense. He's a very important piece of that offense. Chris Thompson, he is on injured reserve. And this comes 2 weeks after losing their starting running back, Rob Kelly. he is on injury reserve as well. So what that has opened up the door for the rookie Samaje Perine. And that offense is going to change. They cannot do the things that they used to do, especially on third down, without Chris Thompson on the field. So it's going to be a problem for the Washington Redskins. And they also lost Terrell Pryor. He's going to have surgery on his ankle. That's not as big of a loss to the offense because Pryor really wasn't getting it done this year the way that they had hoped. But losing Chris Thompson, it's going to be a really hard pill to swallow for the Washington Redskins. I think that pretty much that coupled with losing to the Saints this weekend has pretty much pushed them out of postseason contention.
Looks like it indeed. And for those who utilize Chris Thompson a lot, like myself, this is going to be a hard blow, and better make sure you have that running back depth. But where would someone need to go in case they are now scrambling for someone to pick up in place of Chris Thompson?
Well, you're not going to get Chris Thompson's production, unfortunately, especially if you had him. You probably had him in a PPR league. Although Andre Ellington has just been picked up by the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans just lost Donta Foreman. He was not really the backup, really the complementary piece to LeVar Miller there. So they made an adjustment. The Cardinals ended up cutting Andre Ellington. Texans went and picked him up. He could be a big piece of that offense really quickly. Also in Ty Montgomery is going to be coming back probably in the next week or two. And with a Green Bay running back squad that's pretty banged up too, Aaron Jones is going to be out probably 3 to 6 more weeks. So if Ty Montgomery comes back, that's somebody you may be able to fit into your lineup to get some production out of him. But at this point in the season, there's just not a lot out there. So that's where you need to go to our Facebook discussion group and let us know who's on your waiver wire, and we can help you make a good decision to cover a loss like Chris Thompson.
Definitely, indeed. That's the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook group, also as well ffpaydirt.com. But yes, you go to the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook group. You make sure you ask those questions, lineup changes, waivers. Even if they're still able, your league is still able to pursue trades. You've got to make those last-minute adjustments because you're in the home stretch just before playoff time. So these are the final crucial decisions you might need to make that might give you the edge, or for those teams on the fence, will actually put them over the top this football season. So
yeah, these weeks coming up, you're going to want a different perspective. You're going to want input because – I mean, this is it. This is crunch time. You're either making the playoffs or you're not making the playoffs, and every single point counts. So if you want a different perspective, if you want to just get some advice, if you're close and you want to get over the edge, just get on the Facebook discussion group at Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast discussion group. And man, we are so happy to help you make better decisions.
Indeed we are. And so let's close with this. If you have to pick on some of the matchups this weekend, which players do you see have the greatest potential for busting out with a nice performance this weekend that could really put some teams over the top and back into that playoff race?
Well, I haven't combed over them completely. Just looking at it right now, sheesh.
No worries on that.
I would say Kansas City is probably ready to bounce back against Buffalo. Kansas City has lost 4 out of their last 5. We talked about it on our earlier episode.
Buffalo just came off of a huge loss to the LA Chargers.
Yeah, but Buffalo was a little bit of a mirage this season. It looked like it was a complete fire sale at the beginning of the year. They actually were playing good football. Now I think they're crashing back down to earth. Even with the addition of Kelvin Benjamin, and they don't like the guy that they have starting for him. Poor Tyrod Taylor. But I can see this game. I can see Kansas City coming out and just whooping Buffalo's butt and setting the tone for the rest of the season, because at 6-4, they are still very much in it. But they need to start winning some games, and they need a momentum changing turnaround win. And looking at this Buffalo matchup, this seems like it would be a really, really good week for them to stomp on somebody, change the momentum, and carry it in to the rest of the season. So I would expect Kansas City to not take their foot off the gas when they're playing Buffalo. The Rams and the Saints will be playing this weekend. That is going to be a fun game to watch. And both of these defenses are pretty good, but these offenses can really put up points. So there might be a lot of fantasy value there as well.
So definitely any one of those teams right there, both Kansas City and also as well, who'd you say? I'm sorry?
New Orleans and the Los Angeles Rams.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the Rams coming off of that loss, you're right. Definitely. They need to shake things back up and get back on the right track. And New Orleans, thanks to, your Redskins now are really just coming off that high and could use that momentum forward. So if you've got players that you can get or that are on your team, you want to make sure that you target those players, because they could players on all three of those teams could see big days this weekend. So,
and especially in Los Angeles, they just lost Robert Woods. He's going to be out for a while. So Cooper Kupp is one of those guys who's kind of been on your bench. Sometimes you play him when you have to, but he's on your bench. If you have Cooper Kupp on your bench, this might be a week to start him, because without Robert Woods being there and having to go up against the Saints offense that is going to put up a lot of points, I would expect Sammy Watkins and Cooper Kupp to get a lot of work in this game.
Well, there you go, indeed. And actually on his Saturday show, the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast, you're going to get a big update on exactly who to target as well, plus injury updates as well, correct?
Yeah, because a lot of these guys, like, we don't know if Sterling Shepard is going to play. He's day-to-day with migraines. There's no timetable on migraines. Either they figure out what's causing it or he's going to continue to have migraines. So I'm going to be watching him really closely, because he's going to be the number one receiver in New York. So there's a lot of guys that are just kind of day-to-day. And as the week progresses, then we have a better idea of who's going to play, who's not going to play. So that Saturday podcast is definitely one to catch if you've got guys that are questionable, because there's questionable and then there's questionable. And the Saturday podcast helps you kind of weed through that.
That's awesome indeed. Once again, it's the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast, dropping every Tuesday and Saturday on SoundCloud, Libsyn, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Player.fm, and all those 5 million apps. All those 5 million apps that use iTunes as its main source of drawing from, as far as if it draws that from that library, you got the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast right along with it. So you check that out indeed. Tyler, as always an insight, always a great insight for information. And I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to this weekend in the NFL.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to next time.
And I'm just glad you don't have the shakes from our previous encounter. Working on a whole show. So truly appreciate you being able to step back up to the plate right here on the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast and our fantasy football update on Week 12 in the NFL.
Thank you so much. I'm always happy to do it. And next time Josh gets the sniffles, you let me know.
Sounds good indeed. That's again Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. Always great to have you a part of the PCC multiverse.